out there, if you have to be that gullible to where you don't understand people's terminology, there's going to be a lot of things that's going to be offensive to people.
Yeah, they're going to.
You know, but
I'm giving you a hard time, man.
Some people say, I just whipped them. But, kids show bruises. I mean, we all been there. And that's the same thing. Like I said, I go gutter, so I go in hard. The same thing with the kids is the same thing with the wife. The trigger with your wife, yes, she could be standing on it, but then there's something that's lacking. What is it that you're not doing to keep her standing on the trigger? Mm-hmm. What is it that you used to do that she's missing now, that key component that, good morning, baby, it can be good morning. But she's so used to hearing baby that you put her on the trigger because you're not saying baby, good morning, baby. That's the trigger, and she's going to stand on it and she's not, why my breakfast ain't cooked? Why my eggs are easy and not fried? Because she's standing on the trigger, but she don't want to tell you that she's on the trigger, and it's because you're lacking something. So the thing is, once you start a pattern, we start off bringing roses and flowers because we're trying to get them. Forget that. Treat them like you're going to continue to treat them. If you ain't going to continue to bring them flowers and roses, then don't start at the beginning. And so you stop bringing flowers. You done created this. You've been doing this for a whole year as you was courting her. Now that you're not courting her no more because you done got married, now everything is going out the window. Well, I got my wife. I ain't got to continue to bring her flowers and candy, and you done created a trigger. So now you wonder why she's like, oh man, dang, she just changed all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. And I understand it. Well, you created something for a whole year, and you just can't stop it cold turkey or more. And so the thing is, learning those triggers, learning what you was doing that was consistent, and how you fell off. Now, if you are in a position to where it's a financial struggle and she don't understand the financial value, that's something a little bit different. Now you have to sit down and you got to talk to people. You might have to go see a counselor because she's standing on the trigger, but she don't understand the trigger is because of financial problems. You can't continue to have Versace and Gucci purses if we both working at Walmart. I know when I was working at NASA and you was at Huntsville Hospital, we was able to get the Gucci. So a lot of people wanted to live certain lives. A lot of people want to continue to do what they've been doing, but money may not equal up to what it created. And that's another thing. Like with me, when I was in New Orleans and I was making all of the money doing all kind of illegal things, now where I'm at right now, to me, this feel like hell. Why? Because yes, I'm still making good money, but it's not fast enough. It's not coming like I'm used to it coming. So now this is hell because I'm able to go out here and buy a car every year. I'm able to get the technology that I want and flip a phone and do this. And now it's like, dang, I got kids. They got to come before me. Yes, is it selfish? Yes, I am selfish. Why? Because I ain't have nobody to put before me before. And if I did have somebody to put before me, I had enough money coming in to where it wasn't nothing to take care of them and my needs at the same time. So there's a trigger for me that I'm standing on. Now I got to figure out how to get myself off my own trigger.
So you're talking about some of the frustrations of life and how to deal with those. I didn't mean to cut across, Chris. You can, Mustang, you can go ahead and chime in if you want to, sir.
Oh, no, that's no problem. I was just going to say really, to the guys out there, this is really my own separate thought. And I'm scared to say feel it out because, I don't know what other guys are feeling, I should say, but I kind of feel out the situation. But honesty is easily the best policy. If you find something that you don't like, speak to that person directly. Don't go tell their friend. Don't go tell their girlfriend. Don't go tell their spouse, their wife, their this, their that, your best buddy. Tell that person directly. If it bothers you enough that you've got to speak about it, then go ahead and let that person know. Hey, listen, this, that, and the other. And it's imagine. I suppose if you can imagine, you got a teeny tiny fat needle, or you got this long, 12-foot one, or an eternity really, and this thing that whatever they're doing to you is literally going to continue as long as you allow it to continue. And when I say that, I mean, if you're sitting there, I'll get mad at it and I'll come home and tell my wife about it, or I'll go tell their friend about it, or tell my coworkers about it, or tell my boss about it, instead of directly going and say, hey, Greg, every time we're at the Christmas party, I feel like you kind of throw me under the bus when we're talking, when we're making jokes. I'd really appreciate it if you didn't. Now, Greg can do one or two things. He can say, man, I love doing that, and it makes me feel good. So, and I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm going to keep doing it till kingdoms come. And now you've got that's another situation. But then you've got the second option, which is, dude, I didn't even know I did that. I had no idea I was doing that. Or they may lie and say, I didn't know I did it, and they did know. But, either way, from there, they now have a choice to make to do it or not to do it. And I can tell you from personal experience, 85%, no, forget that, 95% of the time, that person will stop doing it. They know that you don't like it, and we are by nature, we want to avoid conflict, and they won't do it again. So if I can say anything to the guys out there that has worked for me, hey, Chris, Mustang, what's worked for you? CJ, what's worked for you? Is tell that person directly.
Yeah.
Let them know and just be open and honest with them in a kind, gentle, and direct way.
So what we've concluded now after reviewing our discussion thus far is that rebuke or direct addressing of conflict is important. It not only places the burden of responsibility on the person who's stepping across the line to modify their behavior, it allows you to still remain in control of yours. So that's step one. Let's go one more step before we wrap up for today, and let's talk about conflict resolution and how that anger is dissipated depending on how we resolve our conflict. So is anger, in your opinion, the result of unfair fighting or unfair circumstances, or where you feel frustration because the circumstance has not changed? Or is anger the result of unmet expectations when reality doesn't meet the expectation we have for ourselves or our circumstance?
I would go with the last one. Anger is from unmet expectations. A lot of us go into relationships with expectations. And you go in, I went in, and I'm always talk about myself because I have a lot of experience with a lot of things. I went into my relationship with the expectation that, women, once they get married, they sex drive increase, and that wasn't the case.
Right?
And so I came in, and I had a rude awakening. Now,
yeah, you bet.
She keeps up with my sex drive, and there are women out there that have high sex drives, but my wife doesn't. And so,
my wife does not either.
Well, let me stop. Wait, I need to stop right there.
I think that's all.
What? No. No, that ain't true.
No, not what I was about to, I had to preface, but you said I got to say something, so I couldn't say anything. So, but I'll say more on it later.
Well, let me just say this.
Maybe another show.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just say 2 words about this. I think. Oh man, this is so.
You said not all women.
No.
Okay, I'm done. I'm stopped talking. I'm talking.
No, the reason I see at first, let me just say something. I'm gonna just have to get real for a minute. Well, first of all, I think some women are broken. I'm just gonna be real. I think some of them are broken because they've had bad experiences. I think some of them have been through emotional abuse. I think some things that we think are normal are really dysfunction that we've tried to adapt to. And frankly, I'm gonna go a step further that I know that's the case, at least in one. I can almost tell you, I can relate an experience, and I'm going to do it this way because I want to protect the names of the innocent. But I know from personal experience that when I settled down and when dysfunction was happening, for years, I continued to think it was my issue. For years. It wasn't until 8-9 years into the thing when I started saying, you know what, I don't think this is the way. I can't imagine God would create me the way that I am and then stick me with someone who's not created like I am, in the sense of that whole process. You understand what I'm saying? That just seems like something is wrong.
Yeah.
So, there is something that's not right. So I started I decided to break with the protocol because, what we normally do is at home, we deal with our home issues, but we don't tell anybody. We don't talk about it and do any note comparisons or anything. But one day I just got so frustrated. I asked one of my friends, so I said, how many times do you get turned down a week? And when one of my friends told me never in 22 years of marriage, they said never. I said, get that. I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean never? He says, I have never been turned down. In all the time of his marriage, he has never. And then I called another friend. I said, okay, now I know he might be lying. But then I thought, I'll call another friend. Called another friend in another state. Didn't know what I was getting. He didn't know what I was calling him about. I called him up. I said, dude, let me just ask you something. Did such and such and such. And he says, no, never. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. 2 for 2. Something is wrong now. So then I decided I'm going to call my dad. I'm gonna go back to the.
I know, Mama.
I know. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna ask my dad about certain things. I'm gonna say, can you know, that's sometimes you got to get there. You got to go to your father and say, hey, man, no, this is the way I work. Do you work like this? Or, you know, how's that all working? You know? And he says, oh yeah, that's normal. That's how you're supposed to work. That's how I work. That's how, you know, grandfather worked. You know, everybody's like, yeah, that's how you work. And I'm thinking, well, how come it's not working in this situation? And then he said, because, son, that's not you. That's not that situation isn't working for you because that's not the right situation. And at that point, I realized, okay, wait a minute. I'm going to have to really, cause I'm a Christian, and I started saying, well, you know, what God hath put together, let no man put asunder. You know, I went through that whole, you know, cycle of thinking. And then he said, that should never happen because that's not a marriage. And then I started looking at things in a much different way because I had made excuses for circumstances turning out the way that they were turning out when they didn't need to turn out that way. And here's the powerful lesson in that. Until I decided to ask and say, you know what, that is unacceptable. I could not make a change, whether that would have been to communicate to her that this needs to change because this isn't normal, or to make a choice where I say, well, if that person is unwilling, unable, or what have you to change, then I need to change my circumstance. For me, at some point, I had to come to grips with the circumstance as it was, which is this isn't the right circumstance for me. I selected improperly. And that, I think, is a realization, the one realization that is harder for many men to make the leap from, and to communicate that to the person they're with. This is not the way it should be. And when you convert, you know, instead of just accepting it, swallowing it, and sitting down on it for a decade like I did, I challenge men to go to your spouse and say, look, we need to redraw the lines here. I mean, seriously, this is what we've gotten into, and this is how we've sort of adapted our circumstance, but this isn't really the way it should be. And this is how I would like to see it. And then start communicating that, because I dare say, and I'm probably gonna make some enemies. I dare say that most men who are frustrated in their marriages, I dare say they have not communicated effectively how important certain aspects of that marriage, what aspects of that marriage have brought them the greatest pain and discomfort. I dare say that most men have not taken the responsibility of redrawing the lines and saying, hey, this cannot be this way any longer. Instead, they suffer in silence. They bite their tongues. They continue to be responsible. All the while they're hurting. It's why you hear guys going through midlife crises. It's why you hear guys after being married, once their kids get in college, they leave the women that they've been married to for 20, 30 years. You wonder how it is that these old folks split and they don't want to see each other anymore once the kids get out of the house. That's why. And I think if we become responsible and say, hey, you know what? I don't really think this is the way this is supposed to work. And if she continues to think that, then you might have to help bring in someone else, a counselor, a Christian counselor, or someone who is adept at dealing with these kinds of issues, and explore the perspective to help realign that perspective so that both you and she can come to a mutual agreement on what is appropriate and what isn't, particularly if needs are not being met. I just don't like seeing needs not being met. I just don't. And I think a lot of times we talk about meeting needs, but rarely do we talk about it from the perspective that men have needs too. Not just looking over them. I just feel, am I off base there? I mean, do you guys have an opinion on that? I mean, I know it's a little different than what you said, but you know, sound off.
For me, it was kind of like and I thought this was the anger one.
It is. but what do you get angry about? What do a lot of men get angry about? Men get angry about relationships that are not meeting their needs. They get angry about relationships that are frustrating, that are not growing, that are not continuing to blossom and so forth. So anger can happen in the home and outside the home as well. So we talked about outside. I guess now we're talking about inside.
Well, being really frank, no, I don't think the average man has a spouse that wants to have sex continually and every time they ask. I think that's an absolute myth. I think that's some sort of unicorn. I believe that most spouses are like the spouses you see on TV, you see on movies. Even though I know there's no movies and TV and those things are fake, I believe those are reflective of real life relationships where the man's chasing a spouse all over the place and she's constantly saying, no, I'm tired of